Well, let's take you then to KwaZulu-Natal on the ground. Our politics editor, Zbungalwa, alongside our senior politics reporter, Zianda Ngobo, and Karinda Jagmohan, are bringing us the latest this evening. Zbu, let me begin with you. Of course, what has been a very uncertain couple of days in terms of what needs to happen seems to have gained some level of clarity. Let's talk about the position of the police from moving from heading to the Constitutional Court through the State Attorney, seeking for clarity, and then saying they will be effecting this arrest.
Look, that's exactly the point here, Kathy. I mean, it's now a matter, it can be any time now before the former President Jacob Zuma is arrested. And in my earlier crossing, I spoke about him handing himself over. I guess it's worth explaining what has been the discussion here. We understand that the former president has been in discussion with the police leadership, that would be the provincial commissioner and the national commissioner of police, about avoiding a potential embarrassing situation or humiliation, if I may call it that, in that even though the police are supposed to come and arrest him because the 5-day period within which he was supposed to hand himself over expired on Sunday, and today is the expiry of the 3-day period within which the police have to effect an arrest. But our understanding is that there has been an agreement between the former president and the police that instead of them coming to his homestead here in KwaZulu-Natal, they will actually wait for him. He will go to them. So we expect him to leave anytime between now and 7 o'clock to begin his 15-year sentence, Kathy. Now, effectively, that means that that will be the beginning of that sentence. As we know, there has been, as you said, some confusion, because right about yesterday, we saw that letter coming from the police minister and the commissioner of police actually telling the Constitutional Court that they will not effect the arrest unless if they are told explicitly by the Constitutional Court to do so. And their argument was that there were 2 cases that were before the court. Now, that was the case that was heard at the Pietermaritzburg High Court yesterday, and in the case the judgment for which case has now been reserved for Friday. And also there is that application that the former president made to the Constitutional Court for his sentence to be set aside. Now, that will be heard on Monday. But various legal experts actually pointed out to the potential contempt of court that the police would be committing if they did not effect that arrest. Up to this point, Kathy, there has been no response that we have seen from the Constitutional Court, which suggests to me that the Constitutional Court, or at the very least, the Deputy Chief Justice, must have sat and looked at the letter and thought, this letter says nothing or does not nullify the original order or deviate the original order that was made by the Constitutional Court that the former president must begin his sentence today. And that is why we have heard now, including from the Twitter account actually, we have just seen a few minutes ago from the Twitter account of the Jacob Zuma Foundation saying that they are aware of developments and they are in conversation with the authorities, which tells you that something is happening. And earlier on, Kathy, we saw some movement around the homestead with the security cars, those black SUVs moving around. We don't know which direction the former president will take, but we are out here in Ganda waiting for that moment, which we understand will unfold any moment from now, Kathy.
Sbu, it's interesting that the word being used is embarrassment. And Zianda, let me bring you in here. We haven't heard of the need to avoid embarrassment. What we've been talking about has been threats of violence, threats of war that have been spoken about outside Nkandla. So let's speak then about where we are tonight in as far as those threats of violence that we've seen over the last couple of days. Zianda?
Certainly not the scene that we saw over the weekend, where that particular image where there were hundreds, thousands of supporters of the former president that had gathered outside his Nkandla homestead. Today, there's absolutely no one really outside of the former president's family members, like, for an example, Edward Zuma, his son, one of the outspoken members of this particular family, has been stationed outside. In fact, a short while ago, we saw his vehicle driving inside the homestead. Perhaps it is in preparation for Zuma to leave and head towards the Durban-Westville prison. But, Kathy, I tell you that there seemed to have been a misunderstanding or having been caught with their pants down on the part of the organizers of the marches and demonstrations that we've seen over the last couple of days, insofar as they didn't understand that the judgment being reserved by Judge Jerome Mnguni, who was hearing the matter as to whether or not he had the jurisdiction to stay the arrest of Zuma, they thought that that particular reserving of the judgment for Friday, where he will hand down his ruling, meant that this particular order to have the former president arrested would be nullified. And so it doesn't seem as though they had actually made arrangements for people to come here in Nkandla, and had instead planned for this to happen on Friday. So it seems now that the former president will be escorted via his cavalcade to the Durban-Westville prison, that they are planning to shut down Durban and other areas of the province. It's unclear where exactly this will be happening, but of course we know of these threats that you've mentioned. But at the same time, sources within the police and intelligence have told us, Kathy, that the threat was real. You'll recall that there's been some level of criticism as to whether or not this potential threat to violence is it imagined? Is it the media, overhyping this, or is the threat real? And we understand, even from the remarks made by Police Minister Bheki Cele, that inferring on the repeats of the Marikana massacre, that the threats of bloodshed are real. And this is perhaps why then, as Sibungalwa mentioned a short while ago, that there was actually a conversation between the former president and the provincial and national police commissioners to find a way to arrange his movements, knowing very well that his VIP protection unit falls within the ambit of the SAPS, and it seems as though they will now be escorting him any moment from now, Kathy.
Well, Ziyanda, you've touched on the threats of violence, in particular in Durban, so let's take you then to the CBD in Durban. Our reporter Karinda Jagmohan is watching the situation there. Karinda, talk to us about these suggestions of violence tonight, and are police responding to whatever threat it is that they fear?
Yes, good evening, Kathy. Well, at the moment we're outside the Westville Correctional Facility. This is the prison where the former President Jacob Zuma is expected to serve that 15-month jail time, according to that warrant of committal notice signed by Judge C.C. Kampepe. Now, my colleagues in Nkandla who've been there for the past week are speaking about police activity there. It's unclear when exactly the former president will be arrested, if so. But if he is arrested, he's expected to serve that jail time here at this prison. Now, speaking about the threats that is anticipated, as you know, Kathy, over the past week since ConCourt handed down that judgment calling for Zuma's imprisonment, a number of his supporters who gathered in Nkandla and across the country essentially have said that they are prepared to defend the arrest of the former president with their own life. Even yesterday, Kathy, when we were outside the Pietermaritzburg High Court, we spoke to the RET Forces spokesperson, Nkosensha Shezi, as well as the Senko Youth Congress spokesperson, Tulani Gamede, both who we have seen in the past being able to mobilize a number of supporters. They said that they were not mobilizing anyone, but people were coming according to their own choices to come in their numbers and defend Zuma, and going on to say that indeed they will take all steps necessary to protect the former president from really serving that jail time sentence, being arrested and serving jail time here at the Westville prison. Now, at this stage, we're not seeing security in terms of police on the ground here outside this particular facility. This is essentially as we're not seeing any arrest at this point of the former president, but it could be, Kathy, that if the former president is arrested, if he is brought here to the city, we do anticipate that his supporters will essentially follow him, mobilize around him, and try to safeguard him. Like they said, they will take any means to prevent the former president from being arrested. We will keep you updated on the ground in terms of whether there's any mobilization of supporters for Zuma. At this point, we're all waited in bated breath to see what will happen next in Nkandla, Kathy.
Well, our reporters are live at all the critical points that relate to the story tonight. Bungalwa, Karinda Jagmohan and Zianda Ngobo. We're going to pause it there for this moment. Of course, so plenty more ahead tonight. Let's in fact take you then live to Linda Mnisi. He joins us from Eshowe. Linda, you've been watching the situation in Eshowe for a couple of days. In fact, today also being quite significant. You saw an increase in the presence of police there. Speak to us about why there has been that increase and what they're saying about their expectations for tonight.
Kathy, you'll remember that a couple of days leading to the weekend, what we've been hearing were gunshots, and particularly in Eshowe when that motorcade that was organized by the eThekwini region, some of the ANC members from the eThekwini region driving from Durban, passing through Eshowe and all the way to Nkandla. What we heard there were gunshots, and there was, of course, a bit of a standoff between the police when they tried to make their way to the former president's home. So, which gives you an indication that perhaps police have been anticipating that perhaps some of these supporters would be making their way to the former president's home. It's not only that group, but also you'll remember Zulu men, what is believed rather to be Zulu regiments from locally here in Nkandla, coming out as well to throw their weight behind the former president. There has been threats of violence. In fact, if you remember what the former president said on Sunday, that he was quite impressed with how people were taking a stand against what he believes was biasness and an order that was unconstitutional, saying that it's clear that there are people that are still willing to stand for the constitutionality, for the law, and of course for the South Africa that he fought so hard for. And he says, as I look around, I thought that at this moment we would be having a scuffle with the police, but when I look at you and I see the number of people that are here, it then gives me that indication that perhaps it would have taken them time to get to me. What we're seeing today, a totally different picture. No supporters inside who swore that they would defend the former president, they would put their lives on the line and are willing to go at war to protect him against arrest, which gives you perhaps an indication that there was, of course, a level of being blindsided in terms of what the events were holding. We also managed to speak to them about what their interpretation of this court order was, and a lot of them saying that, well, in the beginning, the former president, or rather the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, who chairs the commission, should have allowed the former president's application and recused himself. Then we wouldn't have gotten to this point. They still believe that he has something to share with the nation in terms of those corruption allegations that are leveled at the State Capture Commission. So there is, of course, a number of people that are supporting him, but from the look of things, there hasn't been much movement on the ground today.
Linda, let's pause it there with you as well. All angles of the story for you tonight right here on News at Prime. You can expect more from our reporters. This is a developing story, and we'll bring you all of the very latest news as soon as it becomes available.